Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice for radio. So today, I'm looking at Charmeleon. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, a middle evolution. The middle evolutions are very rarely particularly interesting cards. In fact, to be perfectly honest with you, a lot of the middle evolutions, we just don't even bother playing at all. We just play a rare candy and skip straight over them. Even the ones we do play, it's usually a little bit for convenience. It's so that we're not too reliant on rare candy and all of that jazz. But Charmeleon here is actually a legitimately good card with a really interesting ability that may actually make us want to play it. Which is interesting, of course, because initially we were talking about the new Charizard from this set, and we were talking about maybe we'll play it with Shining Celebi, so that we can basically just copy Charmander's attack. So the fact that we're now actually turning around and going, you know what? Maybe Charmeleon might be our boy. That in and of itself is pretty gosh darn interesting. Now, the fact that it is a fire Pokemon does mean you're hitting weakness against Golisopod. That it is one of the best Pokemon in the format at the moment, and it does have a relevant attack that you may legitimately end up using, which again, for a middle evolution, is fairly unusual. Unfortunately, because it's not a basic, you can't use Volcanion to get a bit of extra damage here with Steam Up, and you can always use Scorched Earth to try and accelerate a little bit, discard a fire energy, draw a couple cards, etc. Retreat cost of 2 is not good. Weakness to water is a little bit of a pain with stuff like Empoleon and Glaceon running around. But honestly, you've got 80 HP here. You're not going to be too worried about the weakness. Your HP is very, very low. Although if we go into expanded, it means you won't be able to use Level Ball, which is actually relevant here because one of the more fun uses for this is going to be in the expanded format. And one thing to remember here is that you have always got Charizard. Now, we are looking at Charmeleon as Charmeleon because the ability is really interesting. But I have done a video about the new Charizard from Dragonstorm, and go check it out. I'll pop a link in the description. Because even if you don't get to use Charmeleon as Charmeleon, you can always evolve it up into Charizard and then do a bit of damage that way. So, I keep talking about this ability, but what does it actually do? When you evolve into this Pokemon from your hand, you may use this ability. Discard the top 5 cards of your deck and attach all fire energy cards you discarded in this way to this Pokemon. It is energy acceleration. Now, it's also fairly risky energy acceleration, so we will obviously have to talk about the risks here. One thing to point out right at the beginning, it's evolving from your hand. So there are a couple of cards that don't. Think something like Wally, think something like Evo Soda. Both of these cards would not activate Charmeleon's ability here, because unfortunately you're not evolving from the hand. In both situations there, you are in fact evolving from your deck. That is something we do need to point out. But then we get to discard the top 5 cards of our deck, and then we can attach them if they are fire energy. Now, when we say fire energy, remember things like rainbow energy, counter energy, etc. are only fire energy when attached. Ergo, if you discard all of these cards, it unfortunately won't actually do anything. They will just be discarded. Now, we'll talk about the discard in a minute, but in terms of energy acceleration, this is absolutely great. You could, in theory, get 5 energy cards on here. Now, we've talked about Charizard, and the fact that Charizard has a good ability, and a pretty nice attack, but it's a little bit expensive, the attack. It's more expensive than we would usually and ideally like. So what we do here is we use Charmeleon, and in theory we accelerate the energy, so we're not having to sit around wondering how we're getting the energy on Charizard. And the other thing to remember here is that you can do this on the bench. So something like Reshiram GX that I looked at recently, it's got an attack that accelerates 2 energy from the deck onto Reshiram. The problem is that then Reshiram's sitting in the active waiting to take a hit. That's a little bit of a pain. You don't want to do that. But accelerating energy on the bench, that's something which is far, far more reliable. Now, of course, there's nothing to stop your opponent doing something like using a Guzma to bring up that Charmeleon and KOing it if you do get all the energy, but that's always a risk. If you bench a Piplup and Aqua Patch an energy over, your opponent may well use a Guzma to KO it. That is the format we're in at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, so there's nothing that we can do about it. And actually, and again, I'm going to talk about a lot of things in this video which are, shall we say, niche plays. Things that might be fun but won't work all the time. One thing you could do with Charmeleon is evolve up, get all the extra energy using the ability, and then use a Wally here to immediately evolve up into Charizard, either to be attacking this turn or to give yourself double the HP, because you literally do double your HP when you go from Charmeleon to Charizard, so that you're much less likely to be KO'd by something like a Guzma. But if nothing else, this is energy acceleration, and it's good energy acceleration. In theory, every time you evolve up into Charmeleon, you should get the energy, so then you're hitting with Charizard. And you only really need to get 2 energy here, because then you can attach 1 for your turn, and you are off and rolling. Now, of course, this does open up a bit of a question. How many energy do we play? If you play enough energy, you're going to end up accelerating with Charmeleon pretty much every time. But then again, if you don't, then you're going to be discarding other cards. One card I really do think you need to remember here is Energy Recycler. And essentially what you do is if you play an Energy Recycler to put 5 fire energy into your deck right before you use this ability, you're much more likely to hit the energy. It's the same theory with why we play it with a card like Max Elixir. The more energy you've got in your deck, especially as the game's wearing on and your deck's getting a bit smaller, the more likely you are to actually hit what you want to here. But sometimes you are going to discard cards you don't want to discard. And honestly, if you're relying on this ability with Charmeleon, you've just got to make sure you're playing a bunch of recovery cards. Rescue Stretcher to get your Pokemon back. Pal Pad to get your supporters back. Maybe a little bit of the old special charge if you're playing any special energy on which you're relying, and of course Puzzle of Time, because that can get anything back. Now, of course, you might end up discarding these recovery cards using Charmeleon's ability. There is a risk with this ability, and it is something we need to bear in mind, but you build the deck to mitigate this risk. You play more recovery cards, you play more energy, and you do play it as a deck that is really hoping to rely on Charmeleon's ability. And maybe if you are playing a whole bunch of basic energy, maybe you do play Max Elixir as well to also take advantage of it. Now, there are a couple of other things we can do with this, and what I love about this ability is it opens up to niche plays, and there's almost certainly a bunch that I haven't thought of. Chuck them down in the comment section. But how about using this ability to get a whole bunch of energy, and then using a combination of Devolution Spray and Ninja Boy? Devolve down to Charmander, at which point you've got a basic Pokemon in the active, so you can Ninja Boy into any other basic Pokemon, maybe something like a Ho-Oh. Maybe you just get the energy onto Charmeleon here, and then you use Energy Switch to switch it over to a Pokemon you do want. There are options here. One thing I really love the idea of is using this in Expanded in a Vespiquen deck and not playing any fire energy, because Vespiquen is a deck where the more Pokemon you can discard, the more damage you do. So you use this in the hope of discarding a whole bunch of Pokemon and then getting set up really, really quickly. And if you don't use it, you can just Ultra Ball away your Charmeleon, and that's absolutely fine. Now, again, this does carry a risk because Vespiquen really reliant on double colorless, and if you end up discarding your double colorless and your special charge, you'll probably lose the game there and then. But it's a very interesting thing to consider. In terms of the attack here, free energy, 80 damage. And you've got to discard an energy attached to Charmeleon. Now, if you had a choice band on here, you're doing 110. With weakness, that will be a one-hit KO on a Golisopod. And given that pretty much all grass and metal Pokemon are weak to fire, this is a fairly nice attack. The problem is you're putting free energy on an 80 HP Pokemon, which is incredibly risky. You'd be much better off evolving into Charizard, at which point for free energy discarding one you're doing 130. Plus, you get the ridiculous ability on Charizard as well. It's an interesting one, and absolutely, this can be used as an attacker in a pinch. It does do a fair amount of damage. I mean, if you're not hitting for weakness, you'll instantly get a KO on something like a Curlier. These middle evolutions tend to have 80 or less HP. So you can get a KO on a middle evolution or on some weak GXs with a choice band. And non-GXs at the moment generally tend to have about 160 at the most. See the Solgaleo from Guardians Rising. So you will get a one-hit KO on them. Or maybe more relevantly at the moment, seeing as it's seeing more play, Solgaleo Prism Star that has 160. So the attack here does actually hit for some quite relevant damage. It's just that you're putting free energy on an 80 HP Pokemon, which is something you're unlikely to want to do. It's good in an emergency, but here it's all about the ability. You can use it to just get Charizard rolling, or you can use it some weird way with Ninja Boy, or you can use it in a weird deck with Vespiquen. There are many different options that we've got, ladies and gentlemen. This is a really interesting ability, and I thought it was worth doing a video breaking it down. I am giving this between 3 and 4 Wassies. We don't give half Wassies. That would be barbaric. It's not used really outside of a couple of niche decks, and even in those niche decks there are enough downsides here to really make us pause and think whether we want to use it. But I do think it's a very interesting card indeed. But as always, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comment section, so go nuts, but be nice. Tell me what you think about this ability. I would love to know. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, etc., then head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio. And do check out my Dragon Ball / video game channel, Wassie Plays, for some more Wassie action. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.